In the ancient world, where myths were born and empires carved their names into stone, there existed a city cloaked in mystery and desire, Babylon, a place of towering ziggurats, complex languages and celestial wisdom. But beneath its surface, something more sinister stirred. Babylon was not just a cradle of civilization, it was a battleground for the human soul. This city became a nexus of strange powers and forbidden knowledge. Its people, once guided by divine law, began seeking shortcuts to control the world around them. They weren't just trading spices and goods, they were trading their very faith in exchange for secret words that promised dominion over wind and flame, jinn and destiny. Magic, real, dark and seductive, began to whisper through the alleys and marketplaces of Babylon. It promised love, power, revenge. It promised to reshape fate itself. And people listened. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed the magic came from scrolls buried beneath the earth. Others swore by the stars and their alignment. But the truth was far more profound and far more dangerous. These weren't spells born of imagination. They were remnants of a knowledge that should have never been touched by mortal hands. And so, Allah, the most just, chose to intervene, not by sending a flood, nor by raining down destruction, but by presenting the people with a test that would pierce through the illusions of their hearts. Two beings of light were sent from the heavens, descending into the heart of corruption, not as punishers, but as a mirror to mankind. Their names were Harut and Marut. Unlike the people of Babylon, Harut and Marut had never known sin. They were angels, pure and obedient, created from light and designed for perfect submission to the will of their Lord. But this mission was unlike any other. They weren't coming to warn. They weren't coming to destroy. They were coming to live, to walk among men, to feel what they felt, to face what they faced. They were given something no angel had ever held before: desire. The same internal compass that causes men to rise in glory or fall in disgrace. And so Harut and Marut descended not only to a city, but into a human condition, equipped with minds of light, but hearts that could be stirred by longing, tempted by beauty, pulled by emotion. This descent wasn't just a lesson for the people below, it was a message to all of creation that judgment belongs to God alone. For when the angels once questioned the divine plan, asking why mankind, a creature prone to bloodshed and arrogance, was made Allah's vicegerent on earth, this mission was their answer. Allah chose not to scold them, but to show them, to place them in the shoes of those they questioned, to let them feel the heat of human weakness and the sharpness of temptation. Harut and Marut were not just witnesses, they were participants. As they stepped into the dusty, sun-soaked streets of Babylon, they brought with them not thunder nor flame, but words, knowledge, the kind of knowledge that opens hidden doors and unlocks unseen realms. They knew the mechanics of the stars, the forces that govern the invisible jinn, the structure of spells and incantations, secrets meant only for those divinely authorized. But they didn't offer these truths carelessly. Every time someone approached them, seeking the power they carried, the angels issued a stern warning: "We are only a test. Do not disbelieve." A line that echoed through the streets like a divine riddle. They weren't recruiting magicians, they weren't building an army. They were exposing the hearts of those who claimed to seek truth. For those who truly feared God would walk away. But those hungry for control, those who craved power over others, those who longed to manipulate the unseen, they stayed, and they listened, and they learned. Harut and Marut never forced anyone to sin. They never glorified what they taught. In fact, they began each lesson with a clear reminder that what they offered was not a gift, but a burden, a test from the Most High. But human nature is stubborn. The warning, though spoken, was often drowned out by the sound of ambition. People began using what they had learned for selfish gains, to control minds, to ruin relationships, to dominate. And so, what had been sent as a test turned into a curse that spread like wildfire through Babylon's veins. But the story doesn't end with mankind's failure alone. What happens when even the messengers begin to stumble? When the ones sent to test are tested themselves? The knowledge Harut and Marut carried was unlike anything known to the people of Babylon. It wasn't simply the kind of insight passed down from father to son, or the philosophical musings of scholars who studied the stars. This was raw, primal knowledge, keys to the unseen realms, formulas that called upon entities made of smokeless fire, phrases that twisted reality in ways the human mind could barely grasp. It was the knowledge of shir, what we today call magic, not the harmless illusions of street performers, but the kind that could poison a marriage, create illusions of beauty or horror, summon jinn to do a master's bidding, and chain hearts with invisible strings of compulsion. And yet Harut and Marut made no effort to hide the dangerous nature of what they knew. They stood openly in the city, and to every soul that approached them with hunger in their eyes, they issued the same unwavering warning: "We are a test, do not disbelieve." And yet, despite this clear and divine caution, curiosity turned into obsession. What was once a subtle temptation became a public movement. People came in droves, some hesitantly, others with certainty in their hearts. They listened to the angels speak of rituals and invocations, of names that shook the skies, of pathways between the worlds. They took these secrets back into their homes, their shops, their courts. They began experimenting. Words that should never be spoken were uttered in the dead of night. Circles were drawn, candles lit, and the veil between realms was pushed aside by those who had no idea what they were truly unleashing. It started small. A man, suspicious of his wife's affections, used a charm to bind her love to him. A merchant, jealous of his competitor's success, used incantations to sow misfortune in his rival's business. But soon, the appetite for power escalated. Sorcery wasn't just a private indulgence. It became a tool of social dominance, a silent war waged in homes and markets and hearts. The once sacred city of Babylon turned into a theater of spiritual manipulation, a shadow world where invisible forces answered to the greed of men. And in the center of it all stood two angels who had never smiled, never rejoiced, and never failed to deliver their warning. But the story turns darker still. For some traditions speak of a woman striking in beauty, commanding in presence, whose name would echo through centuries, Zura. Whether she was mortal or something more is debated, but what is clear is that her presence shook Harut and Marut in ways no other temptation had. She did not approach them like the others, begging for power. She tested them, not just with desire, but with cunning. She requested something forbidden, something sacred, the Ism al-Azam, the greatest name of Allah, the key to unlocking the deepest forces of the universe. And with this request, the angels faced a decision that would define their fate. For the first time since their descent, the purity of their mission faltered. The desires they had been given, once mere shadows at the edge of their minds, rose like waves in a storm. According to some narrations, one or both of the angels succumbed, whether it was the allure of beauty, the longing for companionship, or the whisper that said, "No one will know." They made a decision that angels were never meant to face. They transgressed. In some versions, the sin was revealing the sacred name. In others, it was the drinking of wine, the taking of a life, or a betrayal of their celestial trust. And when the deed was done, the heavens trembled. not because humans had fallen again, but because angels had tasted the very weakness they once questioned. Regret flooded them immediately. Unlike men who fall and excuse themselves, Harut and Marut understood the weight of what they had done. They had been sent not just to teach, but to embody restraint. And now they had breached the boundary. They turned to Allah, pleading for forgiveness, tears of heavenly sorrow falling from eyes that once beheld the throne. But the laws of divine justice are not swayed by emotion. Their plea was heard and answered, not with annihilation, but with a consequence as profound as their fall. They were given a choice, either be punished in this world or in the next, and they chose the former. Thus began their imprisonment, suspended between heaven and earth, in a place hidden from mortal sight. Harut and Marut were bound, not in chains of iron, but in the weight of their decision. Babylon, which had once been a stage for their mission, became their prison. Some say they were suspended upside down in a well. Others claim they were trapped in a cave beneath the city, calling out to warn those who still sought them. They remained not as teachers of magic, but as eternal signs of divine justice, a living lesson that even the purest can stumble when desire overtakes duty. And Babylon bore the scars. The knowledge that was never meant to be spread had already taken root. It seeped into scrolls and memories, into rituals and whispers passed down through generations. Though the angels were silenced, the consequences of their presence echoed far beyond their fall. Magic, once confined to the test, became part of the human story, something sought in secret, feared in public, and always lingering at the edge of the unseen. And so, the line between warning and temptation, between guidance and trial, blurred forever. What began as a divine test had unfolded into one of the most profound tales in the unseen history of mankind, one that still warns us to this day. Not all knowledge is mercy, and not all power is a blessing. The choice to believe, to obey, to turn away from the forbidden, that choice remains ours, just as it did for the people of Babylon, and just as it did tragically for Harut and Marut. Their punishment was neither fire nor destruction. Harut and Marut were not cast out like rebellious jinn, nor were they erased from existence. Instead, their consequence was far more symbolic, more enduring, and infinitely more humbling. They were suspended, not metaphorically but physically, between the heavens they once called home and the earth that had seduced them. Babylon became their prison. Some accounts say they were hung upside down in a dark well. Others say they were sealed beneath the city in a cavern unknown to all but those who sought forbidden knowledge. They were not free to roam, not free to return. They were not killed nor elevated. They remained in that timeless state of suspended sorrow, not as angels in glory, nor as humans in forgetfulness, but as a warning carved into the fabric of spiritual history. There, in that place of exile, they would remain until the day of judgment. But this was no ordinary punishment. Their presence was still known, still felt. People who had tasted the knowledge of the unseen still whispered their names. Some searched for them, drawn not by repentance, but by the lingering hunger for what they once offered. For despite their fall, Harut and Marut still possessed secrets, truths too dangerous for unguarded hearts, and those who found them, or believed they had, were said to hear the same ancient warning, repeated with solemn clarity: "We are only a trial. Do not disbelieve." These words had become more than a caution. They were now a divine echo, a haunting refrain that clung to the tale like a veil of smoke. For what had begun as a sacred test had become a living monument to human weakness and angelic humility. But why would Allah allow such a story to unfold? Why would He permit angels to fall? Why grant mankind access to a power so dangerous that it could fracture societies, sever families, and blind the hearts of men? The answer, as with all divine matters, lies in the purpose of life itself. Allah did not create a world of robotic obedience. He created a world of tests, where truth is offered beside falsehood, where light competes with shadow, and where every soul is given the freedom to choose its path. Harut and Marut were not sent to spread evil. They were sent to expose the inner reality of those who claim to seek truth. Would people choose obedience when offered a taste of power? Would they walk away from temptation even when the door stood wide open? These were the questions embedded in the test. The angels were merely facilitators, mirrors held up to mankind's face, showing each soul who it truly was when no one else was watching. And what of the angels themselves? Their story holds an even deeper wisdom. When Allah first announced to the angels that He would create mankind as His representative on earth, some among them questioned the decision. Will you place upon the earth one who will spread corruption and shed blood? They asked. It was not rebellion, but a question born of their purity, their distance from human flaw. And so Allah, in His infinite mercy and knowledge, chose to answer not with anger but with demonstration. He allowed two of the purest among them to descend with the burdens of choice, with the heat of emotion, with the whisper of desire. And in doing so, He proved that what mankind faces is no simple task, that our struggles are real, our temptations severe, and our need for divine guidance essential. Harut and Marut, through their fall, became more than angels. They became symbols of accountability, that even beings made of light, when clothed in the trials of this world, can falter. Their story humbles the arrogant and comforts the fallen. It tells the pious not to judge, and it reminds the sinful that regret and repentance are the markers of sincerity. It is no coincidence that Allah preserved their story in the Qur'an, not as a lengthy tale, but as a single verse wrapped in mystery, yet piercing in meaning. They taught not any man without saying, "We are only a trial, so do not disbelieve." A sentence that reveals an ocean of wisdom. The angels gave full disclosure. They made no false promises. The choice always remained with the seeker. This then is the wisdom behind the test. That knowledge, even when divine, must be approached with reverence. That power, even when attainable, must be restrained. That curiosity, though natural, must never outrun obedience. The legacy of Harut and Marut is not simply that they fell, it is that they revealed the fragile line between light and darkness, that even a whisper of temptation, if not guarded against, can unravel lifetimes of purity. And yet it is this very struggle that gives meaning to faith. For in a world where sin is possible, righteousness becomes real. In a world where one can fall, the choice to rise becomes sacred. So the question remains, for every generation that hears their story, when temptation stands before you, dressed in knowledge and cloaked in power, what will you choose? Will you heed the warning or follow the whisper? The answer lies not in ancient Babylon, but in the secret chambers of your own heart. Today, the city of Babylon lies in ruins. Its ziggurats are crumbled, its towers silenced, and its people lost to the pages of time. Yet the story of Harut and Marut lingers, not just in ancient texts or whispers carried by the desert wind, but in the unseen spaces between our choices. It lives in the moral tension of every soul, in the daily moments where we are offered the same thing those people once were, the chance to seek power, to dominate, to indulge the self, or to submit, trust, and walk away from what is forbidden. Though the well that held the angels may now be buried beneath layers of forgotten soil, its echo can still be heard by anyone who listens closely to the conscience that stirs inside them. We live in a time of unimaginable access. Knowledge travels faster than thought. Secrets are unveiled with a click, and desires are fed before we even know we have them. In such an age, the test of Harut and Marut is no longer ancient history. It is unfolding all around us. The temptation to manipulate truth, to chase power, to use what we know for selfish gain rather than divine purpose, is as present now as it was in the heart of Babylon. The tools may look different, codes instead of incantations, algorithms instead of amulets, but the core of the trial is the same. Will we use what we learn to uplift or to destroy? Will we honor the sacred boundaries placed by our Creator, or will we blur them in the name of ambition and control? This is why the Qur'an does not give us a detailed biography of Harut and Marut. It does not narrate every step they took or every word they said. It gives us just enough to recognize the pattern, to awaken our moral awareness. Their tale is not meant to be memorized, it is meant to be reflected upon. Allah, in His infinite wisdom, embedded the story not as a fable, but as a mirror, for every generation to look into, to recognize themselves in the questions it raises. Do we take warnings seriously, or do we think we are clever enough to bend the rules? Do we see knowledge as a trust or a weapon? Do we walk humbly in the face of what we don't understand, or do we let arrogance lead us into places we were never meant to tread? And yet there is another lesson, so subtle yet so powerful, that often goes unnoticed. It is the lesson of mercy, that even angels, when burdened with human desire, can stumble, that even divine messengers are not immune to the complexities of earthly trials, and if that is true for them, then how much more should we, as fragile human beings, be patient with one another? How much more should we extend grace to the one who falters, to the one who regrets, to the one who seeks a way back to the light after walking through shadows? This story is not just a warning, it is a reminder that the line between rise and fall is often razor thin, that faith is not about perfection, but perseverance, that obedience is not about never being tempted, but about choosing again and again to return to Allah when the world pulls us away. Harut and Marut were not condemned to eternal disgrace. They were given a choice. They were given time. They were given consequence, yes, but also the ability to repent, to reflect, to wait in humility until the day of judgment. And so are we. So if you've ever looked back at your life and seen choices you regret, if you've ever walked close to the edge, driven by emotion or desperation, if you've ever tasted the weight of knowledge and didn't know what to do with it, then remember the angels. Remember that even those made of light once struggled with the burden of free will, and yet their story was preserved, not to shame, but to teach, not to condemn, but to guide. In the end, the tale of Harut and Marut is not one of hopelessness. It is one of immense clarity. It shines a light on the thin veil between guidance and misguidance, and calls us to take our own steps with awareness. It whispers to our hearts that the truest protection is not found in secret names or hidden forces, but in surrender to the one who knows all names, who holds all power, who sees what no eye can see and hears what no ear can hear, the one who sent angels as a test and prophets as a mercy. So let us not walk blindly into the shadows of forbidden knowledge. Let us not be deceived by the illusion of control. Instead, let us walk humbly with what we've been given, trust in what we've been warned, and remember that the greatest magic is not in spells or power, but in a heart that chooses truth even when it hurts, faith even when it's hard, and obedience even when no one else is watching. That is the legacy of Harut and Marut. That is the test of Babylon, and that is the call that echoes to this very day. for those willing to hear it.